Have you ever wondered what it really takes to wield power effectively? I mean, beyond the polished speeches and, all the virtuous promises.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Today, we're not just reading The Prince. We're really digging into why Niccolo Machiavelli's controversial little book is still seen as this essential manual for anyone studying power.
Absolutely. From ancient Rome right up to modern geopolitics, it keeps coming up.
So, our mission for this deep dive.
Well, we want to unpack the insights from some detailed sources we've looked at. The Prince, A Practical Guide to Power, and The Prince, A Strategic Guide to Power and Governance. These really help peel back the layers, don't they?
They do. They get into the core arguments, and Machiavelli's, frankly, often shocking advice on leadership.
Exactly. It's kind of a shortcut maybe to understanding the mind behind that word, Machiavellian, and, what he truly meant by it all.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll try to pull out the most important nuggets, explore some surprising facts about statecraft that Machiavelli just lays bare.
And try to understand why, centuries later, this book still sparks so much debate. It's fascinating.
It really is. It challenges a lot of our sort of conventional wisdom about what makes a good leader, doesn't it?
Definitely. So maybe let's start by setting the stage. Who exactly was Niccolo Machiavelli? And, why write something so, well, radical?
Good place to start.
He was a Florentine official, wrote The Prince around 1513. But, and this is key, it wasn't just some academic exercise for him.
Right.
He wrote it after his whole world basically turned upside down. He'd fallen from political office in Florence.
Ah.
So he dedicated the work to Lorenzo de' Medici, partly hoping to get back into favor, but also, crucially, to share the very practical lessons he felt he'd learned from history and his own pretty extensive diplomatic experience.
So it came out of real-world experience and maybe a bit of desperation, too, a pragmatic appeal.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Born out of hard-won experience, as you say. And interestingly, it wasn't even published until after he died in 1532.
Wow. And the book itself is pretty short, right? Like a pamphlet almost.
Yeah, just a political treatise, 26 chapters plus the dedication. But its core purpose is what really grabs you. It offers very direct, practical advice.
For rulers.
For rulers, specifically on how to get power and how to keep it. And our sources really highlight this. Machiavelli explicitly prioritized, quote, effectual results over moral theory.
Effectual results. What exactly does that mean in this context? Like, what works?
Pretty much. Or effectual truth is another translation.
Yeah.
It means focusing on what actually works in the messy reality of politics, not what should work based on, abstract moral ideals.
So forget idealism, focus on reality.
That's the essence.
Yeah.
It was a manual, not philosophy, and the style reflects that too. It's not abstract or theoretical.
Yeah.
No, the prose is simple, the logic is straightforward. It feels like it was designed to be easily understood, almost like a how-to guide.
Okay, so he's cutting through all the academic fluff, getting straight to the point. What kind of evidence or method did he use to back up these very direct, sometimes brutal recommendations?
That's a really crucial point. He used what you'd call an empirical and historical method.
Okay.
He's constantly using examples, not just as illustrations, but also as proof. You see him pulling from ancient Rome, the Bible, different Italian states, and even contemporary figures he knew or knew of, like Cesare Borgia. He uses these to justify his rules, providing this kind of case-based reasoning rather than just abstract principles.
So learn from history, learn from what people actually did.
Exactly. What worked, what failed in practice.
And that dedication to Lorenzo de' Medici, it really sets that pragmatic tone, doesn't it? It's about policy, not preaching.
Precisely. And it's also worth noting, the book is mainly focused on autocratic regimes, like princes ruling alone, not republics. That's a key distinction for understanding its scope.
Right, important context. Okay, so with that blueprint laid out, the man, the context, the method, let's get into the core teachings.
Yeah.
Machiavelli doesn't waste any time, does he?
No, straight in. Right from the start, he's breaking down the different kinds of states and how they're acquired. He lays out this classification system.
How does that work?
Basically, states are either principalities or republics. And then principalities are either hereditary passed down or new.
New meaning.
Either entirely new states or territories added on to existing ones.
Okay, so if you're a ruler, where do you start? What about those hereditary states? The ones you inherit?
Machiavelli says those are actually the easiest to rule.
Really? Why is that?
Because you've got existing traditions, existing loyalty, people are used to your family being in charge. The prince just needs to be careful not to mess with ancestral customs too much, keep things stable.
Makes sense. So stability is key there. But what about those mixed principalities? Adding new territory.
Now that's where it gets dangerous, he says. Because the subjects in the new territory are likely to resent you. They didn't choose you. They might have preferred their old rulers, or maybe they hoped for more freedom.
So what does he advise? You can't just ignore that resentment.
No, and his advice here is pretty stark. Tactics like get rid of the former ruling family entirely. Settle your own troops there. Set up local institutions that depend directly on you, the new prince. Or even move there yourself and live among them.
Wow, those are some serious measures, living there yourself.
Yeah, direct oversight. He uses the Romans as examples here. Sometimes they got it right, sometimes they failed badly, demonstrating why these tactics matter.
Okay. What about governing a place that used to be free? A city with its own laws, its own traditions, before you took over? That sounds even trickier.
It is. And Machiavelli gives three, again, really stark options, each one quite extreme.
Let's hear them.
Option one, destroy the city completely.
Just wipe it out.
Yep. Eliminate the potential for rebellion rooted in old traditions. Option two, go live there yourself. Try to integrate it that way.
Okay, like the mixed principalities advice. And option three.
Allow them to keep their old laws, but install an oligarchy, a small group of locals who are loyal to you and depend on you for their power.
So rule through proxies, essentially.
Right. He contrasts the Spartans, who tried the oligarchy route and often failed, with the Romans, who were more willing to dismantle rebellious cities entirely to secure their hold.
It really does sound like a choose-your-own-adventure for ruthless rulers, doesn't it?
It kind of does. And then he gets into how power itself is acquired. This is really interesting. He actually praises founders like Romulus, Theseus, Cyrus.
Moses.
Legendary figures.
They're legendary, maybe mythical figures. But his point is they use their own skill and determination, what he calls virtue, to create states.
Now, virtue, you mentioned that's not virtue, like morality.
Exactly. It's a key term. Think of it more like energy, skill, boldness, prudence, the ability to impose your will on circumstances, seize opportunities. It's about effectiveness, not goodness.
Got it. So these founders who use their own virtue and their own armies.
They are more secure, he argues. Because they built the institutions themselves, they earned loyalty through their own capabilities. They didn't just inherit or get lucky. Okay, so he admires the self-made ruler, the one who builds things themselves. What about the opposite? Rulers who just kind of fall into power, maybe through luck or someone else's help.
Yeah, he addressed that directly. Leaders who rise because of others' armies, or just good fortune, fortuna, another key concept, he says they're inherently insecure.
Unless
they act very quickly and decisively to build their own power base, their own loyal troops, their own support systems, relying purely on luck or allies. Very precarious, he warns.
Okay. And then there's another category, isn't there? The really dark path.
Right. Acquiring power through wickedness. Criminal acts. He uses examples like Agathocles of Syracuse, Alvarado of Fermo, rulers who used murder and betrayal to seize control.
What's his take on them? Does crime pay in Machiavelli's world?
Well, yes and no. It's nuanced. He admits that such rulers can secure power in the short term through brutal cruelty. Agathocles certainly did. But they rarely win long-term glory or stable legitimacy. People might obey out of fear, but they won't respect or admire you. And here's the crucial bit of nuance again. Cruelty can work, he says, but only if it's used strategically.
Strategically? How so?
It needs to be swift, decisive, maybe all at once at the beginning, to establish control, and then followed by order and perhaps even efforts to benefit the populace. Continuous, ongoing cruelty just breeds hatred, which is incredibly dangerous for a ruler.
So it's like a calculated, almost surgical application of force, not just random violence.
Exactly. Use it, get it over with, then establish stability. Don't let it become the norm.
Fascinating, if chilling. He also talks about civil principalities, right? Where citizens elevate someone.
Yes, where a prince comes to power with the support of fellow citizens. Here, the strategy depends on who supported you. If it was the nobles, you need to focus on placating the common people. If it was the people, you need to manage the nobles.
So it's all about balancing these different interest groups within the state.
Constantly balancing. And ultimately, he says, the real measure of any principality's strength isn't just its size or wealth, but whether the prince can actually defend himself.
Oh.
Through strong fortresses, a reliable militia drawn from his own subjects, and maintaining enough public support, or at least avoiding widespread hatred. The mere appearance of strength, without the substance to back it up, is worthless.
Which leads us straight into how a ruler actually sustains that power, doesn't it? And for Machiavelli, it seems like everything comes down to military might.
It really does. He dedicates a whole section, chapters 12 to 14, pretty much entirely to military matters. It's fundamental to his thinking.
What's the main takeaway?
Avoid mercenaries at all costs. He absolutely savages them, calls them unreliable, self-interested, cowardly, and dangerous. He argues a ruler must build his own forces from his own people.
Why so down on mercenaries? They were common then, weren't they?
Very common, especially in Italy. But Machiavelli saw them as fighting only for pay, not out of loyalty. They'd run from danger, switch sides for a better offer, or even turn on their employer. Totally unreliable.
Okay, so no mercenaries. What about auxiliaries? Troops
Nah.
borrowed from another ruler.
Even worse, he says. If they win, you're basically in their debt, potentially under their control. If they lose, well, you lose too. They leave the prince incredibly vulnerable either way.
So the only real option is...
Your own troops, native forces, citizens who have a stake in defending their own state. Military self-sufficiency is paramount.
And it's not just about having an army, is it? It's about the prince's focus.
Absolutely. He states it bluntly. War preparedness, the study and practice of warfare, must be the prince's primary concern. Everything else is secondary. Political survival, in his view, depends almost entirely on military skill and readiness.
It's such a stark focus, almost a dismissal of anything but practical military power and state security.
It is. And that ruthless pragmatism takes us into maybe the most famous or infamous part of the prince, chapters 15 onwards, the qualities of the prince himself and the art of deception.
Right, this is where he really breaks from tradition, isn't it?
Completely shatters it. For centuries, Western political thought, influenced heavily by Christianity and classical philosophy, held that a good ruler had to be a morally virtuous person. Justice, mercy, honesty, these were paramount.
But Machiavelli.
Machiavelli comes along and basically says, hold on, in the real world, lofty ideals can actually lead to bad government.
Wow. Say that again?
Lofty ideals can lead to bad government. Trying to be perfectly virtuous in a world that isn't can actually ruin you and your state.
That must have been an earthquake in political thinking at the time.
Huge. He's effectively divorcing politics from traditional morality.
Yeah.
He argues that for a prince, certain personal virtues can actually be detrimental, politically speaking. And conversely, some actions we'd normally call vices might be indispensable for the good of the state.
Okay, so being good might actually make you a bad leader, in his view. That's quite the take.
It's radical, and central to this is his idea about appearance versus reality.
What does he say there?
That the appearance of virtue is often far more important politically than actually being virtuous all the time. Reputation is a critical tool. People react to what they see or believe about you.
So project an image of virtue even if you have to act differently behind the scenes.
That's the core of it. Consider his advice on generosity or liberality. Seems like a good quality, right?
Sure, being generous.
But Machiavelli says if a prince is truly generous in the conventional way, spending lavishly, he'll quickly drain his treasury. Then he'll have to tax his people heavily to keep it up.
Which leads to
Resentment, hatred even. So, paradoxically, trying to be generous can make you unpopular and unstable. He concludes it's actually better to be seen as parsimonious, even a bit mean or thrifty, because that way you don't bleed the state dry, you don't need to excessively tax people, and in the long run, you'll have the resources you need, especially for defense, and people will respect that fiscal prudence.
Okay, so save your money, even if people call you stingy, because it's better for the state long term. What about cruelty versus clemency? Mercy versus harshness?
Ah, yes. This leads us to arguably the most famous line in the entire book.
I think I know this one.
It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both.
There it is. Chillin' stuff.
It is. But again, there's crucial nuance. He argues fear is a more reliable emotion for the ruler to depend on than love. Love is fickle, people can withdraw it easily. Fear of punishment, that's more consistent.
If you cannot be both. He does add that caveat.
He does. Ideally, you'd be both. But if you have to choose, fear provides a stronger foundation for obedience. However, and this is vital, that fear must not turn into hatred.
Ah, the hatred point again. How do you ensure fear doesn't become hatred?
By using cruelty wisely, as we discussed before, swiftly, decisively, well-directed, maybe to make an example early on, and then followed by order and stability. Don't be cruel capriciously or continuously. And crucially, he warns princes never to interfere with their subjects' property or their women.
Why though specifically?
Because, he says, men forget the death of their fathers sooner than the loss of their inheritance. Seizing property or dishonoring families breeds deep, lasting hatred that leads to conspiracies and instability. So, be feared, yes, but avoid being hated. It's a fine line.
It's a terrifyingly pragmatic calculus. It makes you wonder who in history actually managed that tightrope walk successfully. Calculated fear, but not hatred.
A difficult balance indeed. And speaking of breaking norms, what about keeping promises? Is a prince's word their bond?
Good question. Given everything else, probably not.
According to Machiavelli, not necessarily. He observes that the most successful princes he knew were often masters of deception. They knew when to keep their word and when circumstances required them to break it for the good of the state.
So honesty is optional.
When state security is on the line, yes. He advises that a successful prince must be mentally prepared to act against face, against compassion, against religion, against humanity itself, if preserving the state requires it.
Wow.
He uses that famous metaphor. A prince must know how to be both a fox and a lion.
A fox and a lion.
Yes. The lion represents force, the ability to scare off the wolves, the external threats. The fox represents cunning, the ability to recognize traps and navigate deception. You need both qualities. Force alone isn't enough, and neither is just being clever.
Be strong and be sly. Got it. So alongside avoiding hatred, what else should a prince avoid?
Contempt. Making yourself look ridiculous, weak, indecisive, or frivolous. Contempt undermines authority just as much as hatred, he argues, because people won't respect or fear a ruler they see as contemptible. This also invites conspiracies.
So maintain dignity, project strength and seriousness.
Exactly. And this extends to choosing advisors. A prince is judged by the company he keeps, by the quality of his ministers. Good advisors are crucial.
How do you find good ones and avoid, flatterers?
He advises cultivating a small group of wise counselors and giving them, and only them, the freedom to speak truthfully, even if the truth is unpleasant. Encourage honesty from them, listen carefully, but ultimately the decision must be the prince's own, and shut out everyone else who might just tell you what you want to hear.
Sound advice, even today. And he also mentions winning renown through grand projects.
Yes. Undertaking great enterprises, bold public works, significant military campaigns, these capture the public imagination and build the prince's reputation for greatness. Maintain dignity, avoid flatterers, choose good ministers, and act decisively.
Okay. So we've covered the types of states, the military focus, the controversial advice on virtue, fear, and deception. What's the bigger picture here? Did Machiavelli have an ultimate goal beyond just giving rulers this toolkit for staying in power?
I think he did. And it becomes clear towards the end of the book, he applies all these theories very directly to the situation in Italy in his own time. Chapter 24 is basically his diagnosis of why Italy was so weak and divided.
What was his diagnosis?
He blamed the Italian rulers themselves. Poor military organization relying on those mercenaries. He hated divisions between states, inviting foreign powers like France and Spain to interfere. It's a pretty scathing critique of contemporary Italian leadership based on the principles he's laid out.
So it wasn't just abstract theory. He was applying it to solve a real-world problem he cared about.
Precisely, which ties into his fascinating discussion in Chapter 25 about fortuna versus human skill, or virtù.
Right, you mentioned those earlier. Fortuna is luck, chance.
Sort of. It's the unpredictable current of events, the circumstances beyond our control. Machiavelli acknowledges its power. Maybe it governs about half of human affairs, he suggests.
Only half. So the other half is...
Virtù. That human quality we talked about, the energy, skill, boldness, foresight, the capacity to shape circumstances, to prepare for downturns, to seize opportunities when fortune smiles. It's the ability to impose human will onto the chaos of events.
So we're not just puppets of fate.
Not entirely. Machiavelli believed proactive, energetic action driven by virtù could mitigate or even overcome the blows of fortune. He uses this really vivid metaphor.
Ew.
He compares fortune to a raging river that floods the plains. When it's raging, you can't do much. But in quiet times, people with foresight, with virtù, can build dikes and channels to prepare to direct the waters when the flood comes.
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, but actively build the defenses.
Exactly. And he has another, even more famous and quite controversial metaphor for fortune.
Which is?
He says fortune is like a woman who is more often won over by impetuous, bold young men who treat her roughly than by those who proceed cautiously. Fortune, he says, yields to audacity.
Wow. That's quite an image, very much of its time, perhaps.
Definitely of its time, and reflects that emphasis on boldness and decisive action over passive waiting. He wants princes to be proactive, inventive, forceful in shaping their destiny, not just reacting.
And all this leads up to the final chapter, chapter 26.
Yes, the exhortation to liberate Italy. It's this powerful, really patriotic finale. After all the cool, pragmatic, sometimes brutal analysis, Machiavelli ends with this impassioned plea.
A plea for what?
He calls on a future energetic prince, and he's implicitly addressing Lorenzo de' Medici here to use the kind of virtue he's been describing to finally drive out the foreign powers, barbarians he calls them, and unify Italy under strong native leadership.
Ah, so that's the ultimate goal behind the book.
It seems to be. This final chapter reveals a deeper, maybe even normative, backbone. Beyond just the how-to of power, Machiavelli ultimately desires a strong, secure, independent Italy. His realism serves a patriotic purpose.
That puts the whole thing in a different light, doesn't it? The amoral advice is maybe a means to a greater national end for him.
That's certainly one interpretation. And it complicates the idea that he was purely cynical. It brings his political realism into sharp focus. He's breaking from ideals, yes, but because he believes that's the only way to achieve the stability and security Italy desperately needed, prioritize the state's survival, even if it means getting your hands dirty.
And that core idea, appearance versus reality, remains key. Appear moral, project virtue, but be ready to act ruthlessly when the state demands it.
Absolutely. It's about being adaptable, pragmatic, and focused on results.
Given all that, it's hardly surprising the book caused a storm when it finally came out.
Oh, completely. The immediate reaction was largely shock and condemnation. Many saw it as deeply cynical, immoral, even devilish. That's how the word Machiavellian entered the language, right? As a synonym for manipulative, scheming, amoral, political cunning.
Yeah, it's usually not used as a compliment.
Rarely. But despite that initial and lingering controversy, the Prince became this foundational text for what we now call political realism.
How so?
Modern political theorists, especially in international relations, who emphasize power, national interest, security, and the limits of morality in politics, they often trace their intellectual roots back to Machiavelli. He was one of the first to look at politics as it is, not as it ought to be.
And the debate about his true intentions continues.
Absolutely. Scholars still argue. Was he truly teaching rulers how to be tyrants? Was he simply a neutral observer describing the mechanics of power? Or was he perhaps a kind of Republican in disguise, writing this shocking advice for a prince while secretly favoring republics, as some argue based on his other major work, The Discourses on Livy?
So lots to unpack still, even after 500 years.
Definitely. We've really just scratched the surface here, taking this deep dive into The Prince. Such a short book, but incredibly dense, a manual of political diagnosis and tactics, all grounded in history, and Machiavelli's really sharp, maybe even dark, view of human nature.
A view of human nature as unpredictable, self-interested, driven by fear, but also by hope and ambition. And this exploration, I think, has really shown us how Machiavelli stripped away all those idealistic layers of leadership to reveal this raw, pragmatic core of power politics. It definitely challenges you, the listener, to think about what it truly means for a leader to ensure the survival and maybe the prosperity of their state.
It really does.
Yeah.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps.
Go for it.
If you were a ruler today, facing all the unpredictable challenges, the pressures, needing to secure your state, would you dare to prioritize what Machiavelli called effectual truth over perhaps more lofty ideals? What would the cost be? What might be the gain? And maybe the biggest question, is it even possible to be a truly good leader in the broader sense if sometimes you have to be, well, Machiavellian?